John Huston's The Bible in the Beginning transformed Genesis into a visual feast that Hollywood had never attempted before. Released in 1966, this ambitious epic didn't just adapt scripture. It reimagined how biblical stories could unfold on screen with unprecedented scope and artistic vision. Huston himself narrated the creation sequence, his gravelly voice lending divine authority to the opening chapters. But the real magic happened when he stepped behind the camera to direct sequences that critics described as both ancient and timeless. The Garden of Eden scenes, shot in Italy's lush countryside, created what audiences saw as an earthly paradise that seemed to breathe with primordial life. The all-star cast brought what critics called unexpected depth to familiar characters. George C. Scott's Abraham wrestled with divine commands in ways that reviewers found psychologically complex rather than simply faithful. Ava Gardner's Sarah conveyed what many saw as the bitter irony of a barren woman promised countless descendants. Critics noted these weren't Sunday school figures. They were flawed humans grappling with impossible divine demands. What set this Genesis apart was his commitment to visual storytelling over dialogue. Some speculate Huston understood that creation myths work best when they overwhelm the senses. The flood sequence alone required massive sets and innovative special effects that pushed 1960s technology to its limits. Critics noted how the production's pacing mirrored the biblical narrative itself, slow, deliberate, building toward moments of divine intervention. The production faced enormous financial pressures, with costs spiraling beyond initial projections. Dino De Laurentiis, the Italian producer, had envisioned adapting the entire Bible but scaled back when budgets exploded. Despite mixed critical reception, the picture's influence on later biblical epics became evident through its visual approach, establishing a template that would inspire ambitious religious cinema for decades to come. "1953's Martin Luther arrived at theaters during one of the most politically charged moments in American history. While McCarthyism gripped the nation and Cold War tensions reached fever pitch, this biographical drama dared to celebrate a revolutionary who challenged the ultimate authority of his time. Some film historians argue the timing wasn't coincidental, it was strategic. Niall McGuinness delivered a powerfully restrained performance as the German monk whose 95 Theses ignited the Protestant Reformation. Rather than depicting Luther as a gentle reformer, the movie embraced his fierce determination and intellectual courage. McGuinness captured the internal struggle of a man wrestling with conscience against institutional power, making Luther's spiritual crisis feel immediate and relevant to 1950s audiences. The production team faced enormous pressure from multiple religious denominations. Catholic organizations initially opposed the project, fearing it would reignite centuries-old theological divisions. Meanwhile, Lutheran churches worried about historical accuracy and whether Hollywood could handle their founder's complex legacy with appropriate reverence. Director Irving Pichel navigated these concerns by consulting theological scholars and maintaining strict adherence to documented historical events. What made this Luther particularly compelling was his refusal to sanitize the Reformation's brutal realities. The production depicted the political machinations, economic corruption, and violent upheaval that accompany religious change. Scenes of peasant revolts and papal intrigue reminded viewers that faith-based movements often carry profound social consequences. Several European countries banned the movie outright, considering it too inflammatory for post-war reconciliation efforts. West Germany initially refused distribution, ironically rejecting a story about their own religious heritage. These controversies only amplified the picture's impact, proving that stories about challenging authority remain perpetually relevant. The movie earned 2 Academy Award nominations, including Best Cinematography, cementing its place as both artistic achievement and cultural lightning rod. The Great Commandment emerged during Hollywood's most politically cautious era, yet it delivered one of cinema's boldest statements about peace and human dignity. Released just months before Germany invaded Poland, this biblical drama used the story of a Roman centurion's conversion to advocate for tolerance in a world racing toward war. Maurice McKendry starred as Longinus, the soldier who pierced Christ's side and later embraced his teachings. Rather than focusing on the crucifixion itself, the picture explored what happened next, how Jesus' message of love transformed even those who participate in his execution. McKendry's performance captured the psychological journey from military duty to spiritual awakening with what critics called remarkable subtlety for its time. Director Irving Pichel crafted scenes that deliberately paralleled contemporary events without mentioning them directly. Roman persecution of early Christians mirrored the rising anti-Semitism sweeping Europe. The production's emphasis on Jesus' commandment to love thy neighbor carried unmistakable relevance as fascist ideologies gained ground across the Atlantic. What made the Centurion story particularly powerful was its focus on practical Christianity rather than theological doctrine. Longinus didn't just accept Jesus' divinity, he struggled to implement teachings about forgiveness and compassion in a violent world. The movie showed early Christians hiding in catacombs, sharing resources, and protecting each other regardless of background, creating what audiences recognized as a blueprint for resistance against hatred. Production company Cathedral Pictures distributed the picture primarily through churches and religious organizations, bypassing traditional Hollywood marketing. This grassroots approach allowed the movie to reach audiences hungry for hopeful messages during increasingly dark times. Despite its modest budget and limited theatrical release, The Great Commandment found its way into countless Sunday school classrooms and church basements, where its message of peace continued resonating long after the war ended. The Pilgrims Progress brought John Bunyan's 17th century allegory to the screen with a determination that bordered on obsession. Director Ken Anderson faced what critics called an impossible task, translating a deeply symbolic religious text into visual storytelling that could engage modern audiences without losing its spiritual essence. Robert Clark starred as Christian, the everyman protagonist whose journey from the city of destruction to the celestial city became cinema's most literal interpretation of spiritual transformation. Rather than modernizing Bunyan's language, the production embraced the original's archaic dialogue, creating what reviewers described as a deliberately theatrical experience that felt both ancient and immediate. The production team constructed elaborate sets representing allegorical locations like the Slough of Despond and Vanity Fair. Each environment served dual purposes, advancing the narrative while delivering clear moral instruction. The Valley of the Shadow of Death sequence, shot with dramatic lighting and shadow work, demonstrated how visual techniques could amplify Bunyan's metaphorical language without overwhelming it. What distinguished this adaptation was its educational mission. Cathedral Pictures designed the movie specifically for church screenings and religious instruction, complete with discussion guides and supplementary materials. Sunday school teachers across America embraced the picture as a teaching tool, using Christians' encounters with characters like worldly wise men and faithful to illustrate complex theological concepts. The production's commitment to faithfulness over entertainment value sparked debate among religious educators. Some praised its unwavering loyalty to Bunyan's vision, while others questioned whether such literal adaptation could truly connect with 20th century viewers. Despite modest box office returns, The Pilgrims Progress found enduring life in educational settings, proving that some stories transcend commercial considerations when they serve deeper purposes of moral instruction and spiritual guidance. In 1944, Going My Way transformed Bing Crosby from crooner to cinematic saint, creating Father Chuck O'Malley, a priest who sang his sermons and solved problems with a wink and a melody. Director Leo McCarey's masterstroke wasn't just casting against type, it was reimagining how religious authority could connect with everyday people through warmth instead of intimidation. Crosby's O'Malley arrived at St. Dominic's Parish like a breath of fresh air in a dusty cathedral. Where a traditional movie priest delivered stern lectures, he hummed popular tunes and treated juvenile delinquents like misguided choir members rather than lost souls. His approach to ministry, mixing golf games with gospel lessons, scandalized older parishioners while winning over skeptical audiences who'd grown tired of preachy religious films. The generational conflict between O'Malley and elderly Father Fitzgibbon, played by Barry Fitzgerald, became the movie's emotional anchor. Their relationship evolved from mutual suspicion to genuine affection, demonstrating how different styles of faith could coexist and strengthen each other. Fitzgerald's curmudgeonly traditionalist learned to appreciate modern methods, while Crosby's progressive priest discovered wisdom in established practices. Hollywood took notice when the film swept the Academy Awards, capturing 7 Oscars including Best Picture, Director, and Actor for Crosby. This unprecedented success proved that religious themes could dominate mainstream entertainment without sacrificing commercial appeal or artistic merit. The movie's cultural impact extended far beyond box office receipts. Some reports suggest that seminary enrollment increased following the film's release, as young men were inspired by O'Malley's approachable model of priesthood. More significantly, Going My Way established a template for depicting clergy as relatable human beings, rather than distant moral authorities, fundamentally changing how faith-based characters would appear in American cinema for decades to come. "1945's The Bells of St. Mary's arrived as America's most beloved sequel, proving that lightning could indeed strike twice in the same confessional. Bing Crosby returned as Father O'Malley, this time partnering with Ingrid Bergman's sister Benedict to save a struggling parochial school from demolition, a premise that transformed wartime anxieties into heartwarming comedy. Many critics consider Bergman's casting a masterstroke that few anticipated. Fresh from her triumph in Gaslight, she embraced the role of a determined nun with surprising authenticity, creating chemistry with Crosby that crackled without crossing inappropriate lines. Their playful debates over teaching methods and school management became the production's emotional core, demonstrating how different approaches to faith could complement rather than conflict. Director Leo McCarey crafted scenes that balanced humor with genuine sentiment, never allowing either element to overwhelm the other. The famous ping-pong sequence between priest and nun became an instant classic, showing how joy and competition could coexist within religious life. Meanwhile, the subplot involving a wealthy businessman's change of heart provided hope that even the most hardened cynics could rediscover compassion. The picture's release timing proved perfect for a war-weary nation seeking comfort and optimism. Audiences packed theaters to watch characters who solved problems through kindness rather than conflict, finding reassurance in a world where faith and determination could overcome any obstacle. The movie received 8 Academy Award nominations, validating its blend of entertainment and inspiration, though it captured no wins except for Best Sound Recording. What distinguished this sequel from typical Hollywood follow-ups was its refusal to simply repeat the original formula. Instead of another troubled parish, O'Malley faced different challenges that required new solutions, establishing a template for religious pictures that could evolve while maintaining their core values and universal appeal. The Flowers of St. Francis marked Roberto Rossellini's radical break from conventional religious cinema, casting real Franciscan monks and non-professional actors to create what critics called the most authentic depiction of medieval spirituality on film. Rejecting Hollywood's polished approach, the Italian neo-realist master shot in actual monasteries with handheld cameras, following friars through their daily routines of prayer, work, and simple joy. By using genuine monks instead of trained actors, Rossellini achieved a naturalism that made each scene feel like documentary observation. The friars' weathered faces and unstudied movements brought a lived authenticity no makeup or performance could fake, stripping away the theatricality that often plagued religious films. The film's episodic structure echoed medieval storytelling, presenting St. Francis's teachings as a series of gentle parables rather than a traditional plot. Each vignette illuminated Franciscan values, embracing poverty, marveling at creation, and a radical commitment to peace, expressed through minimal dialogue and visual poetry, letting silence and gesture speak spiritual truths. Remarkably, The Flowers of St. Francis avoided the spectacle typical of religious epics. Instead of lavish sets and sweeping scores, Rossellini used stark black-and-white cinematography and ambient sound, creating an atmosphere of contemplative simplicity. This minimalist style influenced generations of art house directors, proving that spiritual cinema could achieve profound impact through restraint. The film's critical acclaim established Rossellini as a poet of faith in cinema, showing that religious stories could transcend denominational lines when told with genuine reverence and artistry. Celebrated at international festivals, its blend of documentary realism and spiritual meditation redefined how sacred subjects could be approached on screen. The Miracle of Marcelino captured the profound simplicity of childhood faith through the story of an orphaned boy whose conversations with a wooden crucifix sparked international acclaim and a global phenomenon that transcended cultural boundaries. Spanish director Ladislau Vajda built this tender tale around 6-year-old Pablito Calvo, whose natural performance as Marcelino became cinema's most authentic portrayal of a child's unfiltered relationship with the divine. Vajda's genius was in treating Marcelino's miraculous encounters with complete sincerity, never condescending to his young protagonist or the audience. When the wooden Christ figure comes to life to share bread and wine with the lonely orphan, the film presents this supernatural event through Marcelino's eyes, matter-of-fact and wonderfully ordinary. This approach stripped away the theatrical spectacle that often plagued religious cinema, replacing it with quiet reverence. The monastery setting provided a perfect backdrop for exploring generational approaches to faith. The Franciscan monks who raised Marcelino practiced structured devotion, while the child's spirituality flowed naturally from curiosity and loneliness. His innocent questions about heaven and his mother led to theological discussions that felt genuine, revealing profound truths through childlike simplicity. International audiences embraced the film's universal themes of love, loss, and divine comfort. The Miracle of Marcelino won the Silver Bear at the Berlin International Film Festival and inspired remakes across cultures, proving that stories of pure faith resonate beyond religious or national boundaries. Calvo's untrained performance avoided the artificiality typical of child actors in religious films. His Marcelino radiated genuine innocence and natural charm, making his spiritual journey feel authentic. The film's enduring legacy lies in its recognition that faith often shines brightest through the unguarded hearts of children, establishing a template for spiritual cinema that honors both mystery and simplicity. Released in 1957, St. Joan marked Otto Preminger's most controversial religious picture, transforming George Bernard Shaw's complex play into a cinematic battleground over faith, politics, and artistic freedom. Gene Seberg's casting as the teenage peasant who claimed divine visions sparked immediate debate. Critics questioned whether an unknown American actress could embody France's most revered saint. Preminger's adaptation refused to simplify Joan's story into conventional heroism. Instead of depicting her voices as clearly divine, the movie presented them ambiguously, allowing audiences to interpret her visions as genuine revelation or psychological phenomenon. This approach infuriated Catholic organizations, who demanded clear affirmation of Joan's sanctity, while secular critics praised the production's intellectual honesty. Seberg's performance captured Joan's fierce conviction without romanticizing her fate. The trial sequences, shot with documentary-like intensity, showed how religious and political authorities manipulated theological arguments to justify their predetermined verdict. Richard Widmark's Dunois and John Gielgud's Warwick represented opposing forces, military pragmatism versus ecclesiastical power, that ultimately crushed Joan between them. The picture's philosophical dialogue, lifted directly from Shaw's play, challenged audiences with complex questions about divine authority and human judgment. Joan's famous declaration that her voices came from God, not the church, resonated powerfully during the 1950s, when religious institutions faced increasing scrutiny over their temporal power. Censorship battles erupted across multiple countries. Spain banned the movie entirely, while France demanded cuts to scenes depicting clerical corruption. These controversies only amplified Preminger's reputation as Hollywood's most fearless director, willing to tackle subjects others avoided. Despite mixed reviews and box office disappointment, St. Joan established a template for religious pictures that questioned rather than affirmed traditional narratives, paving the way for more psychologically complex portrayals of faith and doubt in cinema. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment. Also consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell to get notified of our new videos each week. Thanks for watching.